I know that there's good gold down there, but we got 100 ounces right here. And we got another 200 ounces right here.
Jesus.
Yeah, we had a rough week. Had some downtime at the plant, but I was able to scrape up 50 ounces.
Rick Ness has just made the boldest move of his career. Walking away from an empty mine that nearly broke him, he's betting everything on a new claim. One rumored to hold a staggering $75 million in gold. The risks are higher than ever, the ground is untested, and one wrong step could cost him everything. But if Rick's gamble pays off, it won't just be a comeback. It will be the strike that rewrites Gold Rush history. So before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe. The camp had gone silent. Machines that once thundered day and night sat rusting in the damp air, their steel arms dripping with Yukon mud. The sluice box, once alive with glittering hope, was choked with sludge, nothing but dull silt, sliding through mats that should have sung with color. Weeks of diesel, sweat, and rage had bought them only a few pitiful ounces. The ground was bone dry of gold, a corpse of a claim picked clean. Around the cut, men shifted in restless silence. Some cursed under their breath, spitting into the muck, boots kicking gravel like it had betrayed them. They had clawed through frozen veins of earth, believing each shovelful was bringing them closer to fortune, only to be mocked by emptiness. Cameras caught Rick Ness standing on the edge of the hollow pit. His face, hardened by years of Yukon winters, didn't sag with defeat. Instead, there was something else, something colder, something unshakable. He wasn't looking at what was lost. He was staring past it, into something only he could see. The whispers traveled faster than the wind through the valley. Ness's ground is dead. He's finished. Men in nearby camps laughed over their campfires, their voices carrying into the night. A dead claim was a death sentence in the north. No fuel, no payroll, no reason to stay. The end, everyone thought, had arrived. And yet, Rick said nothing. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. Those closest to him would later swear that silence wasn't defeat. It was resolve. He had already set his sights on something bigger, something that would make this barren pit look like an afterthought. By the time night fell, rumors had already spilled into Dawson bars. In the haze of whiskey and cigarette smoke, talk began of a hidden deposit, a lost valley said to hold a fortune so massive it could bankrupt entire crews with envy. $75 million in untouched gold. Some dismissed it as barroom folklore, drunken sourdough tales that had killed better men. But others leaned closer, recalling fragments of truth. Old miners who had vanished with sacks of gold no one could explain. Faded maps, edges charred by fire, surfacing again like cursed relics. Symbols carved into parchment, marking a narrow tributary that didn't exist on government charts. They said the creek wasn't just rich with dust, it held something else. Ancient, glacier-washed nuggets the size of fists, trapped in gravel since before men walked the land. Gold so pure, it carried a strange weight, the kind that warped compasses and tempted men to murder. A fantasy to some, a fool's errand to others. But to Rick, listening in the dim glow of the bar lanterns, it wasn't just possible, it was necessary. His old mine was dead. His rivals were circling. His name was on the verge of being forgotten. The $75 million wasn't a dream. It was the only road left. When dawn came, Rick gathered his crew around the gutted pit. The mud was frozen hard, the silence brutal. His words cut through like an axe in timber. "We're done here. I won't burn another gallon of diesel on empty ground." The air turned heavy. Some men erupted, their rage spilling out after weeks of wasted sweat. "We don't walk off gold," one shouted, his face twisted with fury. "Even crumbs are better than chasing ghost mines." Others muttered about paychecks, about debts, about how madness had finally cracked their leader. Rick didn't flinch. His voice stayed steady, colder than the frost, forming on the steel of their idle excavators. "I'm not throwing lives, time, or diesel into a graveyard. There's better ground, and I'm going after it." The line was drawn. Boots stomped in the mud as half the crew stormed into the night, their curses echoing into the timber. They left in fury, swearing they'd never dig under Ness's banner again. But not all of them left. A handful remained, silent but unshaken. They weren't there for the wages anymore. They were there for Rick's instinct, that strange, uncanny gut that had once pulled fortune from impossible ground. If Rick said there was gold in the shadows, they would follow him into the unknown. So, in the icy dawn of a failed mine, with a broken crew split in two, Rick Ness didn't linger on what was lost. His eyes turned forward, to the whispers of a valley said to hide 75 million in gold, and his decision set everything in motion. Engines rumbled low, their noise swallowed by the dark Yukon night, as though the earth itself conspired to hide what Rick Ness was about to attempt. Convoys of trucks moved like shadows across the frost-bitten ridges, trailers stacked with iron beasts, wash plants, dozers, and excavators chained down tight. Their headlights flickered through the mist like ghostly lanterns guiding the way, casting fleeting beams over gravel roads and black rivers. No announcements, no handshakes, no goodbyes. Just an exodus carved in silence. By dawn, his old claim was a skeleton. Tents ripped down, fuel drums vanished, the once bustling pit left hollow as if it had never seen man or machine. Locals who wandered past stopped in disbelief, their boots sinking in churned mud where men had once worked around the clock. The saloons lit up with gossip before noon. "He's gone, chasing the 75. Old-timers spat whiskey into sawdust floors, calling it madness. Rivals laughed at the very thought, yet some kept their ears pricked sharper than knives. Because everyone in Dawson knew one thing about Rick Ness. His mistakes might cost him fortunes, but his instincts had always drawn him back from the brink. If he was rolling dice on a lost valley, then maybe, just maybe, he knew something nobody else did. Still, his convoy didn't move unnoticed. Far behind, headlights blinked in rhythm, strangers tailing his every turn. Rival outfits dispatched spies, men leaning on cracked dashboards, whispering into radios. From the bars of Dawson to the quiet backroads of the Klondike, word traveled faster than engines. Rick Ness wasn't just abandoning his mine, he was chasing something bigger, something that could shift the entire balance of Yukon gold. The convoy pressed deeper into the wilderness until the gravel thinned and the road split into little more than rutted tracks. Cliffs rose black against the fading moonlight, jagged faces like walls closing in. The air smelled different here, cold, metallic, like stone soaked with secrets. The trucks rolled down into a canyon so forgotten it looked like it had grown teeth, rock spires jutting upward, as if warning intruders to turn back. But Rick's eyes, locked on the map, spread across his lap, the worn paper illuminated by the dashboard glow, circles drawn in red ink, edges burned, cryptic marks no one else could decipher. At the valley floor, a creek whispered under the night sky, its surface glinting with faint silver light. A miner's eye caught it immediately, flecks of gold, tiny yet unnaturally bright, dancing on the water's edge. Not the powdery dust of overworked claims, but raw signs of something older, something untouched. Ness crouched by the stream, scooping a handful of silt into his palm. Even in the dim glow of his headlamp, it shimmered with a promise too heavy to ignore. Geological scars crisscrossed the canyon walls, grooves carved deep by glaciers that had once bulldozed through the land. To the trained eye, they weren't just wounds, they were clues. Ancient ice rivers had dragged treasures across mountains and dumped them into natural pockets, hiding wealth beneath layers of stone. The soil readings his crew began to take defied logic, the density spiking far deeper than the surface gravel should allow. Numbers that didn't make sense unless something colossal lay buried below. Rick's foreman leaned close, waiting for him to speak. Rick's voice dropped low, almost reverent. "This ground, it feels alive, like it's been waiting for us." But if Rick could see the signs, so could others. Word of his midnight journey hadn't just spread, it had detonated. In Dawson, Tony Beats sat back in his chair, grinning through his beard at the news. "Stupid," he growled, though his eyes betrayed suspicion. Stupidity didn't usually inspire men to gut an entire camp and vanish overnight. He dispatched scouts, quiet men who knew how to keep their eyes open and their mouths shut. And Tony wasn't the only one. Across the Yukon, rival miners planted informants along back roads and watering holes, paying cash for coordinates, for whispers of where Rick's convoy had been spotted. By dusk, the quiet valley began to hum with unseen eyes. Drones buzzed overhead like angry hornets, their lenses catching glimpses of loaders and dozers carving new paths into the canyon floor. Men in unmarked trucks parked on distant ridges, binoculars trained on Rick's crew. The valley's isolation collapsed in an instant. What had been Rick's secret gamble was now a stage lit under firelight, predators circling from every direction. For all its promise of wealth, the canyon had become a battlefield without a shot fired. Every rivulet of water, every shadowed slope, now held the weight of eyes hungry for a fortune too big to ignore. Rick could feel the pressure thickening like smoke in the air. This wasn't just about striking gold anymore. It was about survival. Because if the legends were true, if $75 million in ancient glacier gold really lay beneath this ground, then every drill strike, every shovelful, was more than mining. It was a gamble with lives on the line. The drills screamed through gravel, steel biting into ground no miner had touched in living memory. Water hissed and spat, mud churning up from the depths, and then, suddenly, color. Not the weak shimmer of flour gold, not the faint dust that usually clung like glitter in the pan. This was different. The sluice mats caught fire under lantern light, littered with jagged, heavy pieces, chunky enough to thud when they dropped into a pan. A hush settled over the camp, broken only by the rhythmic thump of machinery and the ragged breaths of men who knew exactly what they were looking at. One pan was raised in the glow of a headlamp, and within it lay ounces, where most creeks might have offered mere grams. The crew stared, speechless, and in that silence, Rick Ness finally allowed a grin to split his dust-caked face. "This isn't just pay dirt," he growled, voice carrying like thunder over the rigs. "This is the jackpot." The work didn't stop. It couldn't. Shovels, loaders, excavators roared into life like beasts starved too long. Every bucketful of gravel seemed denser, richer, heavier than the last. When the mats were cleared, the gold clung in clusters, forming ribbons thick as fingers. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Pockets of impossible density, gold pooled as if some ancient hand had scooped it into traps beneath the valley floor. Geologists muttered theories that crumbled under their own weight. Some whispered of Ice Age floods, channels cut and erased by glaciers, rivers swallowed whole and spat out somewhere the maps had forgotten. Others simply shook their heads and stared at the gleam piling high under torchlight. Tables bowed beneath the weight of pans, gold pans burned the eyes with reflected light, and the sound of nuggets clinking against one another rang like the chiming of coins in a treasure vault. Rick walked among his men, silent at first, letting the spectacle tell the story. Nuggets the size of knuckles sat in open palms, too heavy to believe. Clean-up trays filled, spilled, filled again, and the tally leapt so fast no one dared say it aloud. Some began to whisper anyway, their voices hushed, reverent. This valley, this hidden crease in the Yukon, was the one. The kind of find that could tilt the balance of mining history. 75 million wasn't just a dream. It was suddenly plausible, maybe even conservative. But the gold brought shadows with it. No strike this rich could stay secret for long. And secrets in the Yukon have teeth. The first sign came quiet, almost dismissible, a loosened bolt on a conveyor, caught before it turned lethal. Then a sluice line burst, ripped open not by wear, but by something sharper, more deliberate. Tracks appeared in the mud where no machine of theirs had run, curving off into the trees and vanishing in the frost. Men returned to their bunks, swearing tools had been moved. Generators sputtered for no reason, as if unseen hands were creeping at the edge of camp. Some shook their heads, muttering of sabotage. Others, older men who'd lived their lives in these valleys, spoke lower still of the curse. The old Yukon tale that gold too rich carried its own punishment, that fortune stolen from the earth demanded blood before it could be spent. Rick listened, but did not bend. He had seen too much, fought too hard, to let superstition slow him. He gathered his crew, his voice carrying through the flicker of firelight and diesel haze. "This ground isn't cursed," he said, every word sharp as an axe in the cold. "It's contested, and if they think they can scare us out, they don't know who they're dealing with." His jaw was set, his eyes locked beyond the camp into the black ridges. "If they want war, they'll have to dig faster than me." The valley answered in kind. Machines snarled through the night, headlights slashing through fog, buckets plunging into ground thick with promise. But momentum carried a cost. Behind every strike of steel, behind every wash of gravel through the sluice, came strain. On man, on machine, on sanity itself. Engines never slept. The valley shook with the endless growl of iron teeth, tearing earth, with men staggering through shifts that blurred into one another until time itself felt like another enemy. Hours stretched into days, days into weeks, and the machines began to sound more like wounded animals than tools. Belts shrieking, bolts rattling, steel frames quivering under loads no sane miner would dare demand. Arguments sparked in the cold nights, sharp as the clink of shovels dropped in anger. Some swore they were pushing too hard, that exhaustion and risk would kill them before the gold saved them. Others, their eyes lit with feverish gleam, shouted that the only way out was through, that the mountain would never forgive hesitation. The breaking point came sudden. A loader, its treads slick with mud, pitched toward the cliff's edge, wheels spinning as it slid. Shouts tore through the valley, men rushing, ropes thrown, engines roaring in reverse. For a heartbeat, the machine hung half off the ridge, metal screaming against gravity's pull, before it jolted back onto solid ground with a thunderous crash. The silence afterward was suffocating, every man staring at what could have been blood on the rock. But no one left. No one quit. The trays glittered too heavily each night, the sluice tables spilling light brighter than lanterns, and fear itself bent beneath the weight of fortune. Rick Ness was no longer talking about survival. He wasn't talking about payrolls or debts or even the winter creeping closer. His words cut deeper, grander, about rewriting history, about chiseling his name alongside the giants of the Yukon. "We don't stop until the ground itself gives out," he told them, voice ragged from dust and sleepless nights. And the men listened, because every cleanup gave proof. This was no fool's dream. This was destiny, spilling golden across steel trays. The weigh-in came like Judgment Day. In the center of camp, the trays stacked high, shining under the sickly glow of floodlights, nuggets the size of fists, chains of gold woven by the river's forgotten hand, dust packed so thick it looked like brickwork. Men gathered close, shoulders pressed tight, their faces hollow from exhaustion, but their eyes locked and burning. The first numbers ticked upward, 1,000,000, 2, 5, each rise marked by a murmur through the crowd. 10 million passed, and no one spoke. 20 turned men pale. 30 brought trembling hands, someone whispering a prayer. The counter climbed like a fever dream, the stack of gold more surreal with every measured weight. When the total surged past 50, men began to shake, muttering to themselves that it couldn't be real, that no ground could bleed this much wealth. 60, 70, and then the final trays, heavy enough to bow the table, were poured into the count. 75 million. The number landed like a hammer blow. The night went utterly still. No cheers, no shouts, just the sound of breath fogging the air and firewood popping in the silence. Men stared at the pile as though it might vanish, as though waking would rob them of everything. For a moment, they weren't miners anymore. They were something else, something closer to myth. Word carried fast. Dawson whispered like a church in sermon, the story spreading on wind and whiskey alike. Rick Ness had walked away from empty ground and dug straight into the richest claim in memory. Rivals who had mocked him, laughed at his gamble, now ground their teeth until their jaws ached. Some tried to dismiss it, calling luck or trickery, but none could ignore the numbers, the proof stacked higher than any man could carry. Old-timers shook their heads in awe, muttering names of pioneers whose bones had long since returned to the earth, men who carved empires out of ice and mud. Now, they said, Ness belonged among them. But legends are never born clean. Talk of the curse lingered. Too many accidents, too many broken bolts, too many shadows skulking at the edge of light. Some said the gold itself demanded sacrifice. Others swore rivals still prowled, waiting for a chance to steal what they could not earn. Yet those whispers no longer sounded like warnings. They sounded like the price. Rick sat by the fire that night, the flames dancing in his eyes, his face carved by shadow and ember glow. Around him, the camp buzzed in disbelief, in celebration, in fear of what came next. But Rick didn't look finished, not even close. His gaze wasn't on the pile of gold, nor on the men swapping stories in hoarse voices. He looked past it all, into the black horizon of Yukon night, as though already measuring the next ground, the next fortune, the next legend, waiting to be torn from the earth. For men like him, 75 million wasn't an ending. It was only the first chapter.